So how do we support new moms, new parents in this, and new families, and being able to be a part of that and any aspect of it, anytime that you are hearing her, seeing her, or them, can be also part of the healing process. So yeah, next slide.
And here we really want to look at what we've been discussing about showing up with compassion and kindness, being open to hearing really difficult truths, and really serving in a way to help others feel seen in, as we've said, many of what may be their most vulnerable moments. So trauma-informed care means really recognizing the importance of how healing happens in relationships and how we can, through all of our interactions, be working to develop trust, looking at various ways of promoting safety, both physically in the rooms with us, and ways that our responses and our verbal and nonverbals are building safety and feeling that we're working on this together. We're here to help navigate through a lot of decisions and a lot of processes, that you do have a team surrounding you, supporting your best interest. So looking at how are we doing this with embracing diversity and making sure that we are looking at things in a holistic way. Again, recognizing that it's going to be different for everyone. So are we really following the patient's lead, and looking at healing some of that harm in severing of relationships that they may have experienced somewhere along the line. Next slide. So similarly to when we're talking about, if we're discussing ACEs, we need to always be pairing that with making sure we're also talking about resilience. We want to be looking at how are we centering healing in all of these interactions and responses. So the concept of healing-centered approaches are also highlighting the importance of culture, the importance of spirituality, and that importance of that collective healing, that collective responsibility, and having that all be ways that we reduce that feeling of isolation, or sometimes what feels like too much of a focus on the trauma, right? It's important to identify and recognize that trauma, and help people understand the ways that trauma is impacting them. But we don't want that to be where the story ends. And sometimes it can be a little hard to keep hope alive based on the totality of someone's experiences. So this is where making sure that we're talking about that pathway from victim to survivor to hopefully thriver is a lot of what we're doing in this healing work. So everything that's trauma focused or informed should also be healing centered. All right, next slide, please.
And these are some short-term interventions. So to part of the question from earlier about, well, what happens if I'm in the room on this visit, in this appointment, and I am the provider being triggered, being prompted by something, or just like overwhelmed by what's being shared or the interaction, what's going on. And so one part, this is to also, you can share this with the people that you're working with. And the second part, you can use these things. So I guess I come from the school of philosophical psychological thought here that that all humans can benefit from these types of practices. So I think like the things that I suggest for my clients are also things that I am doing my best to also have in my own life, and use and to be skillful and effective, just as I suggest to my clients to have that be helpful. So very much taking in all of the skills as well and applying them on myself and my own life. And one of the, I'm going to say best ways, although I don't necessarily mean that like categorically, but the breath is one thing that is always with us until we cease to be breathing. But for the duration that we are alive and doing the things, we have our breath with us. And there are some practices that can help us upregulate or downregulate with our breathing pattern. Our breath is something that communicates our emotions and our body. And so when we have a very shallow, fast, like quick pace of breathing, that is the same kind of breathing that gets our muscles ready to go. It puts in a lot of oxygen into our muscles, and it kind of takes the focus away from our brain because we're about to do something. This might be because we're running away from a lion that has been chasing us. This could be because we are playing soccer and we need to go run and chase after the ball before the other team gets after it first. So, and a whole host of obviously other reasons. Actually, I could probably have brought in examples of labor, right? Like breathing's super important. We need to be able to control the breath in order to be effective at what we are doing, whatever that is. So in those examples, there's ways of like, what I would say, like up-regulating, having there be a more breathing, a quicker pace. Then conversely, we can also focus on down regulating. Well, what about times where, okay, great, I've run away from the lion, I passed the ball, I got the ball and I passed it to my teammate, or it's like post-birth resting now, bringing the breath deeper, longer exhale rather than a longer inhale, and allowing the oxygen to flow a little more freely, come back to the heart, come back to the brain, and go into rest and digest mode. Really announce our parasympathetic nervous system coming in. So focused, intentional breathing, longer exhale or longer inhale, depending on what you're trying to do. Also, I know I'm spending a lot of time on just the breath, but one more thing here is simply noticing your breath. Not actually changing it at all. And maybe while I'm saying this, you're maybe doing that or bringing now your, pink elephant here. Now you're focused on where is your breath in your body? Is it in your chest or your belly? Is there a color? Is there a texture? Is there a temperature in the back of your throat or in your nostrils? Is there movement that you're feeling in your shoulders or your face? So there's a lot of different aspects to your breath. And even without changing your breath, just bringing your awareness to your breath also has an effect on your present moment, on bringing in your thoughts and collecting yourself into just doing one thing, which is breathing. Or in this case, I guess I'm talking, so you're also listening. So almost mindful. So breath. And then the last piece about that is that it's something that not only is with you, but it's also something that you don't necessarily have to announce to the world that, oh, I'm going to be doing a breathing practice right now to help myself regulate. You can simply do that. You can engage. You can focus on, okay, where is my breath? Or a little body scan, where is my body? Where is the weight of my body sitting in the seat? Or are my toes on the ground? Just any kind of thing about oh, my physical body, here I am in the moment. So kind of extending from that, there's some others in here that don't require any tools or extra things or places to be. And then there's some on this list that do require something else. Like if you're coloring, you're going to need something to color with and color on. Paper and crayons, coloring book and colored pencils, whatever, pick your medium. Different types of guided imagery can be really helpful. There's some apps. I really love to use Insight Timer. A lot of my clients love Headspace. There's another app called Calm. There's another one called Calm Harm, something like that has like a bunch of coping skills in there. There's probably way more than that. Feel free to share in the chat with one another also. I think this is half the time how I learn about really cool video clips, and also apps is just from various participants and clients in groups that I run. Other things like letters of encouragement you can write to yourself or to another person. Pros and cons list of making decisions. Pros and cons about doing this thing. And then conversely, pros and cons about doing a different thing or not doing the thing. Sometimes that like actually having 4 sections of that can be a little bit more added than just simply pros and cons of doing a thing. And then again, like stretching, yoga, those body interactions are super helpful. Again, some of that you might not be able to, not necessarily going to bust out in yoga in the moment of a visit when you're feeling traumatized or re-triggered. But, just kind of like this variation of also things you could do before an appointment that might be challenging for you to be present through, kind of starting yourself off well, and or afterwards. Sometimes this happens, have a certain visit at the beginning or the end of the day, or consider it maybe after lunch, because then you're fully fed. I do better when I'm fed. So things like that. And relying on one another. So network, your colleagues, your family, your friends, your communities that you're involved in, and of course, bringing in all kinds of other practices, which actually, next slide, who's on the next slide? Yeah. So here we go. And maybe Sandy, you're going to chime in here too, but a whole bunch of things that having certain habits that are spiritual, physical, mental health, getting in nature, taking care of your physical body with sleep and activity and good nutrition. All of these things, if they're regular and ongoing, if you can focus on those, you're going to reduce your vulnerability to being overwhelmed by emotions, or your client. Like really, this is what humans skills for humans is what it should be.
Yeah, skills for humans in general, right? And the importance of, as we were saying, making sure we're building in the time for this, and reiterating the importance. I mean, we do that in our workplace, making sure that it's becoming something that people aren't feeling that they don't have time or space for, again, making it more common practice. And the more regularly you're doing these things, especially with mindfulness and breathing activities, the quicker your body responds and those stress reduction experiences come into play. So I think these are the reminder too, that even though we may have health consequences from adversity or trauma, there are still daily practices or minute to minute practices that we can add to our toolkit, and other ideas you all have. I love the access to nature. I love we're literally anything that's bouncing that serotonin, right? Petting animals, equine therapy, planting, use of hands in soil and gardening, things that are enriching. So prioritizing time for it for ourselves and for our clients is key. Next slide.
Mm-hmm. So we have some active listening skills. So I'll go over a couple different ways of thinking, different strategies for kind of what to do exactly in there. So it's like, okay, conceptually keeping in trauma informed, practices in mind, like this person might have this history, okay, but then what do I say? Or like, how do I say what I need to say? And this may also be active listening, may also be another training that this could definitely be an all-day training in and of itself. But at least as an overview. And then Sandy, are we gonna do a second vignette after our break, or we're
No, I think we're gonna do the
focus on the
activity and the
self-care?
vicarious trauma. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. So we just wanted to share so much. So being realistic here. Okay, so the first active listening skill, they might be named slightly differently in doing some of this research. I've just come across there's the labels might be slightly different just depending on kind of which house of thought that you're coming down from. I did put where the active listening project, the resource tips link. What am I trying to say? The citation, you can go see where I got this from. And that was actually a really great, it was like several pages, like a brochure on a website that was really good too. So first is reflecting. So hearing what a person is saying and then saying it back to them, which sounds kind of like parroting. And actually, in some times, or if the brain is going like this, actually not a bad time to just say back exactly what is being said. That is showing the person that you did, in fact, listen. You weren't thinking about what you were going to respond. You weren't thinking about the point that you're trying to make. It shows, and it's also a skill, to be really in the moment and hearing what it is that the other person is saying. You could kind of like mirror also their facial expression. That is sometimes helpful for the other person to see you, and that kind of like reflects back. Maybe the person didn't realize how worried they looked, or how much anger was in them, or maybe deep sadness that maybe they're not articulating. Of course, the therapist would sit there and process, and it would probably be like could be a whole session, but it really is like in the moment. It doesn't, you don't have to know all of the behind the scenes like science and interjection about all of that. It really is a matter of like, okay, when we're connecting with another person, how to really be on their level, and how can my neurons see your neurons, and there is science to kind of reflect on that. And it's a way of also being kind of like non-verbally. So our body is also going to communicate. So the way in which my body is fixated and postured is going to be how my brain thinks. So if I'm like this and my shoulders are in my ears and my shoulders are all tense, I'm now talking tensely, and I'm feeling a lot of tension here in my body. Versus if I like relaxed it and it's a different posture, it feels differently. So that can also be a way to non-verbally communicate and engage with the other person, just simply as a way of being on the same page. That doesn't really require any other agenda than simply I'm here, I'm seeing you, I'm hearing you. The second is encouraging. So not necessarily encouraging like being a cheerleader, although that has its place too, and that can be super supportive to know that like, oh yeah, you're going to cheer for me also. Like this is really, I'm trying really hard and you're seeing me try hard, and that's really good. In this case, we're encouraging them to say more. So if someone brings up something of like, oh, this concern, or, this struggle, like I'm struggling with breastfeeding, and it's not just because of the posture that I'm holding my child and I'm looking at them, like there's another layer to this. And one way could be like dismissive, like our vignette that we had, which, be like, oh yeah, it's hard for everyone, isn't it? Oh, it just doesn't come easy. Keep practicing. Where actually our active listening skills might suggest that you know what, I'd like to hear more about that. Or, oh, what are those other things that you mentioned? Some like, additional layers. And so these are also saying that like, hey, I have the space, I have the time, you're not a burden to me. I want to hear actually the whole story, not just the cliff notes. Um, assuming that you have the time left in the session. So yeah, encouraging having little comments. You may have also just kind of done this naturally if you're chatting with friends or colleagues and you have like little there's a term for this. Maybe it will come to my mind, but it's like little vocalizations that are made when someone else is talking and you're like listening and tracking with them and you say, uh-huh, oh yeah, oh right, yeah, uh-huh. It's these things that are like quite natural for a lot of people to do in various ways, or also the eye contact and the nodding, leaning forward. All of these are also ways of encouraging the other person to say more about whatever it is that they're talking about. Next slide. Oh, this is the next slide. These are two other things. It looks very much like the last slide. So summarizing is kind of like reflecting, but a little bit more. So this is, you're going to let the person say a few things. So if they're, I was going to say going on and on, but I don't mean that like in a negative way. Like if they're just having a lot to say and you're listening and you're following along, one way to show them to express, to convey the thoughts that are in your mind, which might be, oh yeah, I'm listening to all of these things and I'm understanding. How you can communicate that is by providing a little bit of a summary, like 1 or 2 sentences that encapsulates what it was that they just said. This takes a little bit more skill and practice in this, I would say. And it also, I think, provides, well, I guess both, provides an opportunity in order to see if you are, in fact, tracking correctly, if what you're saying is, in fact, what they're saying. So if it's not what they're trying to get across, now they have an opportunity to adjust what they're saying, explain something a little bit differently, and then you can be on the same page, because communication is hard. Maybe you have noticed. So summarizing back, hey, I'm following along, I'm trying to understand, and I'm here. And then the 4th active listening skill is exploring. And this is maybe asking about some facet that they haven't yet talked about, or maybe like a next steps. Like, okay, we're on the same page and we're talking about this thing and like, oh, well, what might you do with that? Or, oh, how would that work? Or when would you see yourself doing that? Or when did that happen? Actually, would probably be a really good open-ended question from the vignette about, oh, when you say a long time ago, when exactly was that? And doing it in a way that really is curious and non-judgmental, not like, oh, well, when was that? Exactly. Right. So leaving our attitude at the door a little bit. And so this is showing that you really invested in them and their well-being and that of their family as well. I think asking not just about themselves, but in what ways is this going on in the family as well? Yeah. And next slide. We have 3 minutes. Let me see.
Could do this
Yeah.
one and then we can take the break.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I can go over this in 3 minutes. So some additional tips for responding are, the first level is paying attention. This is a lot like that first, like reflecting, just eye contact, mirroring what is it that's happening with the person across from you. And then reflecting back. Honestly, just paying attention and not having a cell phone out these days is you're doing number one. Like if you're not also looking at your cell phone when you're having a conversation with someone, you're like already validating their presence, that they matter. So yeah, then number two, reflecting back. Number three, saying what hasn't been said. So is there a particular body language that they're expressing to you, or is their face doing something? Is there some context clues that you can pick up and just kind of like inquire of like, oh, is this really frustrating for you? Or is there something that you're confused by? And it can also give an opportunity for them to correct that and say, oh no, I'm not frustrated. I'm actually just really excited. And that can also give you clue into like, oh, is this how she expresses excitement? Or oh, maybe there was something that was coming across not quite like clear in communication, but now she was afforded to explain what it was that she was trying to communicate, again, because communication is hard. And so when we can have these active listening and skills about being validating and present, then it helps to ease that communication. As I was saying that, I thought also to define validation, we are not required to be agreeing with anything. This isn't like condoning something or approving of something, of the person's behavior or their thoughts or emotions. This is acknowledging what is, and it's knowing that any kind of behavior makes sense in some way. So there is like a kernel of truth, and emotions are always going to be valid because that's the person's personal experience. So through these skills, it's ways of really showing up and acknowledging and seeing the person truly how they are. 4 and 5 look at past experiences and also present context, present experiences that can help us understand why a person was thinking in a certain way or acting in a certain way. Certainly understanding trauma is going to be super helpful on those two. And the last is to be yourself. So really to show up and be authentically you. Good chance you're going to connect the best when you're able to do that, and when you're able to be in around other people and agencies and community that supports you in being you. I think there is a bit about being a trauma survivor that radar of picking up on when someone is BSing is just very on point, is very strong. And so just knowing you might not be really understanding where they're coming from. You might not agree with their family values and existence of trauma. Okay, fine. But this like number 6 validation is I'm being as open and like not open, like sharing everything, but just genuine of this is me and I'm here to see you just as you without judgment. Yeah, I think that'll take us right up until break. Any comments or any questions just about those few sets of skills? Maybe some of that is familiar.
Fair enough. I bet people would like a break.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Sandy and Jessica. We're going to put you all on your last 10-minute break for today. So I'll put up the timer and see you guys back here at 3:12. Because they're Thank you, everybody. Have a good break.
Thanks.